Lovely.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. So, as per introduction, I'm the Executive Director who's probably been most closely leading in Essex County Council the work on the business case. And I should say, is it possible for everyone to go on mute? There's a little bit of background chatter. Thank you. Been leading the business case. I should say thank you. We're very keen to brief. Hopefully, can I just check you can hear me all right? I've got so many messages popping up.
Yeah.
Is it all loud and clear? Yeah. So the presentation should take about 30 minutes, maybe a bit less. There's quite a lot of detail, but what I'll try to do is draw out the key points. It's a tailored presentation to you as a group of voluntary and community sector organisations. So hopefully we've narrowed in on the main things you want to hear about, but then there is plenty of time for questions. We've been doing similar presentations with business groups, with care providers, with our main contractors. And as I'll say, we are doing this in sort of good faith in terms of there are 4 business cases for local government reorganisation submitted in the Essex system, but we are obviously here to explain in more detail the Essex County Council business case, which in the end, we hope you see why it is a compelling business case and that you might be prepared to support it in the forthcoming consultation from government. But I will explain all of that. So, and of course, we will make the slides available, so no need to take any additional notes. Late joiners, we're recording, and I think we'll transcribe Q&A. So if we go on then, Vicky, to the next slide, please. This is what I will cover. Cover the ICS. Can we have the slides back?
It's all right. I've turned the slide. I thought I was sharing the slides. Vicky, can you share the slides again? That's my fault. Sorry, apologise.
That's all right. Don't worry. Don't worry. So this, just to give you a sense of what I will cover, obviously, I'll just say something about why we're here and why this is such an important group. I will very briefly cover devolution, but today we are focusing on LGR, local government reorganisation, and then the longest section by some stretch is the 3 unitaries and onto the local government reorganisation and localism proposals within, and then we'll round up with a little bit on the timeline, process and next steps and how you can be involved. So let's crack on. So, I mean, there's a lot of information here, but is a way really just of opening and beginning as to why the organisations represented here are many, many more partners in the Essex system. You'll see 5,000 voluntary sector organisations are so important and why local government reorganisation is important to you. So I just wanted to sort of begin really by acknowledging that. And then as I'll illustrate, and it says at that final bullet point that our business case really recognises the role that the sector plays, and obviously you as individual organisations, and how we envisage that working in a restructured system. So that's just a sort of summary and weigh in. If you go on then to the next slide, please. Very, very headline. Why are we doing any of this at all? I mean, several different reasons. We're not, as Essex and the Essex system, at the top table. You'll remember when Keir Starmer walked into office, within 3 days, he was meeting mayors across the country, and the government is very clearly wedded to devolution and believes in the mayoral model. They could have adopted devolution without mayors, but they followed on from previous government. I don't think I need to tell you the system is very fragmented. I don't think there is any CEO or leader in the local government system, or indeed the sort of key cabinets, who are resisting the move now away from 2-tier government to single-tier government. I mean, it's interesting, actually, the ICS, your slides there flicked up, or your planner. I mean, our system is not aligned. There are various things happening. The government today has also announced the abolition of police and crime commissioners, but our public service system is not aligned. And as we do move to devolution, which is a pretty much slam dunk certainty now, the current system is not a good foundation for that, for reasons I'll explain. So that's just really some of the headline messages. If you go on, Vicky, to the next one, this map, so we just put this in late edition, is from the recent IMD stats. We spend an awful lot of time in these presentations talking about systems, structures, committees, but let's remember that local government and wider partners beyond the public sector, i.e. including you, and public partners are delivering in a county which is fundamentally quite divided. So its aggregate performance on all sorts of data is pretty good, but I don't need to tell you, very sharp divisions in levels of prosperity, etc., etc. And the recent last week IMD map, Index of Multiple Deprivation, shows that the darker colours are the deciles, i.e. the 10% most poor, and so on and so forth. So darkest. You'll be familiar with the map. I just sort of thought when we're talking to you, particularly in the work you do at very local level, often really, really important to recognise why we are doing the sorts of reforms we're pursuing. If you keep on going, then devolution and LGR. So you might think, oh, I'm using these terms interchangeably. I'm a bit confused. Devolution is essentially decentralisation of powers from national government. So we're creating a new mayoral combined authority, so made up the constituent members Essex, Southend and Thurrock. Think of Andy Burnham, Andy Street, Ben Houchin as mayors already operating that way in other parts of the country. Local government reorganisation is the abolition of all 15 councils in the Essex system and the replacement of that two-tier system with new unitaries. And we include this in every presentation we do, just as the sort of absolute grounding description, very simple terms of what these two processes running hand in hand are. Vicky, if you go on then to the next one, I will say something very brief on devolution, so keep going. I could obviously do a much longer talk on devolution. So we are creating a mayoral combined county authority. I think will in the end be known as the Greater Essex Combined Authority. A mayor elected in May next year. Hopefully this is pretty intuitive. The focus being, as it says in the middle, drawing down powers, responsibilities from central government rather than from local authorities. On the left-hand side, it's a body focused on economic growth, strategic decision-making, as well as some statutory functions, but equally clear what it isn't is a local authority delivering public services and particularly not involved in core local authority services like social care or waste. So just again, a very simple primer. And if you go on, Vicky, to the next slide, which will show the range of powers. This is from the government white paper. I mean, a very simple framework here, the devolution powers that becomes available to strategic authorities, i.e. the combined authority. At a glance, you'll see those top four bars really focused on economic development, as I think you would expect, broadening out into environment, climate change, health, wellbeing and public service reform, but no sort of firm devolution of powers, more at this stage overriding duties, although we are beginning to talk to the ICB colleagues about how we work together. And then public safety. If you've seen the news today, that police crime commissioners will be abolished as directly elected officers, but we've been planning for this all the way through, where there is a mayoralty, those powers will be assumed by the mayor and they will appoint a deputy mayor for public safety or for policing fire and crime. So there's a lot of change, but main point here, focused on economic development, but with a broader suite of powers. That's all, if you go on, Vicky, that I'm going to say on devolution, because the rest of the presentation, as it says here, Greater Essex and local government reorganisation. So keep going. Key messages for you, and really important, because you might be looking at this and thinking, well, why are there 4 proposals? Is the system at loggerheads, etc., etc., etc.? I think I'd like to reassure you, and we presented this to MHCLG colleagues, the government department, last week, very strong record of collaboration, even though there are different proposals, and we're absolutely wedded to continuing that. There are 4 proposals. I'll show you briefly what they are that have gone forward to the government, and it's a government decision. And on those proposals, again, as I'll illustrate, there are some similarities between the 3 and 4 unitary proposals, but we think the 5 unitary proposal has some very marked differences. You can argue it both ways. They're good differences, bad differences, but is a distinct proposition. Underlying conditions, those bullet points at the bottom, I mean, why do we think our proposal is the balanced and right approach? There is, as I think you will know, a very high level of financial risk in local government generally, but particularly in Essex with its thorough debt and some highly indebted district councils. We do need a smooth transition. So we're moving, for example, from 3 upper tier services, so Director of Adult Social Services, Director of Children's Services, Director of Public Health. There are 3 in the system at the moment, and we think that allows for a smooth and orderly transition. And then I think no one involved in this wants to destabilise the stability and actually the very good performance on adults and children's social care that we have in the Essex system, in ECC, but in Southend and Thurrock. And we think our proposal minimises those risks. So those are really some of the key headline messages, but I will take you through some of the detail. So Vicky, keep going. I said there were 4 proposals. So at a glance, you can see the maps here. So the one with the golden box around it, that is our Essex County Council proposal. It is supported by Braintree and Epping Forest. And it creates 3 unitaries. The colours show the geography, the white lines show the existing district or unitary boundaries, and the population figures are the size of the new unitaries. The government had set a 500,000 population guideline. Very clear that they say it's only a guideline, could be above, could be below, but we've aimed slightly above. You'll see the other 3 proposals, which I'm not really going to say very much more about. There are different configurations of the maps there. There's a compelling logic, obviously, to all of them. They've been done in good faith. There is supporting evidence. We just reached different conclusions, and the 4 business cases all published together on a single module where you can access them. So and what I'm going to talk about is the one in the top left, the 3 unitary model with that east to west geography. If you keep going then. So now moving on to our proposal, just some headline figures. I'm not going to read all of these out, obviously, but those 3 east to west geographies, north, mid and south, there's some really key factors, particularly about their economies, about their east-west links, the prime transport corridors in this county area, and some stats there about additional housing needed. We know the government is desperate for economic growth. We know housing pressures are significant. And these are just some of the key features, and we could go on and on about the individual places. But again, at a glance for you, the underlying sort of rationale on an economic footprint for these new geographies. If you keep going, this is just a quick summary, and there's a couple more detailed slides on the finance. So as I already said, aligned to real economic geographies, that east-west corridor, the main transport routes. Again, as I'll come on to, balanced size, strength and resilience, because go back to the map I showed you about deprivation. I mean, that's a proxy for need for public services, but it's also a proxy for where you've got stronger and weaker tax bases. And I'll show you briefly the figures, although I'm not going to dwell on the financial modelling. We think that this proposal pays back in just under 3 years, let's put it simply, and starts to accrue very significant savings in the system over the medium-term period. And that is important. We're not doing this because of financial resilience and solely for efficiency. But if we don't achieve efficiency, we're unlikely to be able to meet some of the other ambitions that I'm going to talk about. This is not a call, and indeed we're not in the business of critiquing really the other business cases, but just some headline points there about what we perceive as some of the downsides to other models. I've already made the point, of course, about less disruption, lower risk, and a quicker transition to the new model, which for customers, users, providers, contractors, third parties like yourselves, I think will be important. If you keep going then, so this is very headline. There are a couple of slides on finance. This is included just to give you a sort of overall sense of scale. So the circled diagram on the right-hand side is the total local government expenditure gross within the Essex system. And you will see the majority of it is Essex County Council activity. So taking the education services, the social care expenditure and other activity, obviously that includes waste and highways as well as smaller functions, you're significantly over 50% of expenditure. So in other words, the disaggregation, which is what will be involved, splitting up of the county, involves the lion's share of funding. The two unitary councils, Southend and Thurrock, account for 17%, and then the districts obviously split 12 ways, 18%. So it's not to say that one is more important than the other, but we're really clear and wide-eyed about where the money sits and where the expenditure and costs on disaggregation are likely to be realised, as well as the benefits on aggregation, i.e. merging functions together. The HRA, just for completeness, is the housing revenue account, which is managed separately for those councils that have council housing. If you keep going then, the next slide, I mean, this is a fiddly table and it's included more so you can have a look at it if you want to. The thing that I would draw attention to is the bottom grey bar, so not the shaded out, but the payback period. And obviously there is enormous amounts of economic and financial modelling behind these business cases. You see implementation costs, top of the table on any of the models. The 2, 3, 4, 5 is the number of unitaries. No one is putting forward a 2 unitary model, as is that second column, the 3 unitary model. So in all cases, there are upfront costs of setting these new structures up, and obviously they vary. You then see, and detailed modelling sits all behind this, year-on-year savings after an initial payback period. And I've said already, our modelling, which is the same as what the government used in the white paper they published, done by PwC, is that our proposal would start to pay back after 3 years or just under 3 years. Conversely, the 5 unitary model does not pay back at any time in a sort of, I mean, certainly in a career's worth of work. And for those of you who might really want to get into the finance, we're more than happy to talk to colleagues about that. But this is just really a snapshot of what then underpins the rest of the business case. So Vicky, if you keep going, I'm going to try and get to the end by probably just after 2 o'clock, to be honest. Some of these I will skim over. You've got them and we'll have them in the pack. We've done a lot of engagement. We haven't been out to poll people on, do you like this one or that one? What we've done is engagement with partners and with residents to really understand what they want out of local government. It's recognised as page numbers in here in the business case, but funnily enough, residents are saying, well, we want good value for money and we want good services. So that sort of informs what we're doing. The trick is how we get there. And we had a really powerful round table, important to our thinking in the summer, generously organised by the Essex Community Foundation. And as I'll show, we've carried a lot of that thinking into our business case and our proposals, embracing the public principles that ECF has published. Colleagues on this call may have been at that round table or seen some of the follow-up. So we have done a lot of detailed engagement. There is more consultation to follow. If you then keep going, the rest of the presentation is just going to unpack bits, if you've looked at the business case, really what we're saying on localism, because one of the obvious critiques is, well, you're creating 3 unitaries, they're very large populations, big geographies, are we going to lose local identity? So in our business case, localism, absolutely central. We recognise that top-down public service delivery is not the way forward. We enshrine that in our Caring Communities Commission, as it says at the bottom. And you can see the most obvious areas, and please add to the list of where that local engagement and involvement is so important. And not to mention, but you know, I don't think needs repeating, the work that you do to sort of bring what the right word really is, but sort of non-financial benefit. And so our partnership with organisations like yours is crucial. So localism at the heart of our business case. If you go on, Vicky, I'm just going to really share some of the detail of, okay, so what does that mean? I've said most of this already, I think, but some headline points. So as a sector, you're at the heart of our service delivery and thinking. We will be embedding localism. I'll come on to new neighbourhood delivery committees. We propose them. And we think if we pursue the model we're setting out, we can create a £30 million endowment fund that goes into neighbourhood delivery setup to ensure that there's some sort of petrol in the tank. The risk with any proposal is easy to write. What might happen is rather harder to agree and guarantee that it will happen. And then there is an important point about many fewer councillors. We don't shy away from that. It's one of the consequences of these reforms. And we think if you put that together, it doesn't mean that the 3 unitary model is any less local than 4 or 5, just because our councils happen to be a bit bigger. We think with the right approach, we can really embed that localism. So if we keep going, I'll give you a little bit more about some of those main features. Hopefully lots of you are familiar with this. The principles I've already referred to, published by ECF, they're here set out partly to acknowledge them. We've acknowledged them in the business case, translating them through, I think this is from the ECS itself, what it means in practice. We endorse those principles in our business case. If you then keep going, Vicky, I appreciate there's a lot of detail for everyone here. Potential neighbourhood delivery committee areas. So in our business case, we propose setting up new neighbourhood delivery committees, i.e. committees of the council. If you just go back one, please. Committees of the new unitaries. Is it possible to go back to the map? Sorry, Vicky. Yeah, thank you. Of the new unitaries, they're set out here. It is worth saying, obviously, all new unitary councils as they form will have a degree of license about what they actually put in place. But hopefully, if you, again, at a glance, you can see recognisable community names in the list there, the main places of Greater Essex. And it is worth saying that the government is legislating to require neighbourhood governance as it reforms the system overall. So this is our proposal for what they would look like. If you hop on then to the next slide, again, a lot of detail, but I'll stick to the bold lettering, service leadership, so taking the lead, and I'll show you some examples on particular services. Obviously, in an influencing role, they will have community investment funds, and they'll play a really important role in scrutiny. The neighbourhood delivery committees in the main would be led by councillors of the unitary council, so they're not just a sort of area reference board. They don't usurp the role of parishes. They are a delivery mechanism within the new unitary council. If you go on to the next slide, which illustrates some of the main service areas, I don't think this would be a surprise to you. It will obviously vary hugely from place to place, and we have some strong town councils, for example, anyway. But I think a familiar list of services, again, we're a bit trigger happy here, a list of services that you would expect to see, but very much in our model, what you see being managed and led at a community level. If you go on then to the next one, just a bit more detail on these. These are obviously some of the design features. How do you make successful neighbourhood delivery well resourced and efficient? The 3 cities model, so the one we're promoting, the 3 unitary model, creates financial headroom to sustain and invest in community projects. They've got to have real influence. I've given you a sense of that. And I've already talked about the neighbourhood delivery fund, which we hope the business case will sort of bequeath to be used to get such arrangements off the ground. If you go on then, please, Vicky, to the next one. I won't dwell on this, simply to say we've looked around the country, engaged carefully with places like Durham, Cornwall, Buckinghamshire, who are well on their way with their journey. I'll leave that there for you to have a look at. We're based our thinking on that, and recognising that in Essex, a place of 3 cities, 2 new towns, heavily parished, is going to vary in actual practice how we do it, but we're looking at best examples across the country. If you keep going, councillors, again, this is really drawing your attention to some of the key features in the business case. The red box is really where the rubber hits the road. There are currently 700 councillors across the 15 councils under this proposal, and in line with Boundary Commission guidance and precedents set elsewhere, that would actually be reduced to 284. So a councillor representing a bigger geography, but it says in the upper boxes, actually a simplification of democracy, a much clearer and simpler system for residents. But I don't want to hide from the fact that there will be significantly fewer councillors in our proposal. as indeed significant reductions in any proposal that has gone forward from Essex. So those are the headline stats there. If you keep going, I promise we're getting towards the back end of the presentation. Couple of quotes from the business case, again included really for if you want to have a look at this and share with partners, but I hope reinforcing the points that I've already made. VCS is absolutely essential to successful public service delivery, and in terms of others that we might expect to see involved in some of these neighbourhood delivery arrangements, local NHS, housing associations, local police, etc. So it's a sort of convening of wider partnership, as I've already said in previous slides. If you keep on going, Vicky, please. Next step, so happily coming to the end of the presentation, high level timetables here. So this, I put local government reorganisation and devolution back together. So I'll deal actually with the right hand side first on devolution. It's a bit simpler and more clear cut. We're in the middle of designing the combined authority. The interim chief executive will be announced shortly. The government is about to lay the legislation to create it. So there's a particular statutory instrument needed. And then really we're full bore to the election. The combined authority comes into legal force early in 2026. And the mayoral election, 7th of May 2026. And as I'm sure you're aware, various parties declaring candidates sort of as we speak. We're waiting for the full set. Local government reorganisation takes place over a slower timetable. We, of course, have gone past the 26th of September, so our proposals are in with government. There are 4 of them. The government is on the cusp of launching statutory consultation, so we think all 4 will be put to particularly stakeholders. I mean, anyone can respond, but I think it is a stakeholder consultation expected imminently, and we will be writing out to you and other partners to draw your attention to that. We've provided the government with various bodies. What then happens after that? The government takes a decision. This is very simplified. In March 26, it will be this number of new unitaries on this geography, and then the real work begins. New councillors are then elected in a shadow form in 2027. So the identity of those councillors and councils is known at that point, and they operate as a shadow council for a year, setting up the budget, the staffing, the operating model, and then go live in April 2028, which, as you'll spot, is midway through the mayor's first term, a 4-year term. So you've got 2 things absolutely bound together, but happening on slightly different timetables, and obviously all contingent on government and parliament approving aspects of this. I think we are at the very end of the presentation, Vicky. Sorry, one final thing. I mean, this is early thinking on transition. I won't say much more. It really sums up what we've said. But I guess to re-emphasize the point that in our business case, we have recognised the importance, as ECF colleagues have asked us to do, in embedding civil society representatives into the arrangements as we manage that transition. Next one, Vicky. There we are. That's not bad. 201. My details are here. Obviously, you've got colleagues in ECC. Our comms team are on the call, Charlotte Britton and others. So, Chair, back to you to field questions. I haven't looked at the chat, I'm afraid, so you'll have to you'll have to navigate this.
Yeah, I don't think that we've got anything in the chat at the moment. But I think Tina, are you managing the Q&A part?
Yep, I'm happy to so if anybody's got questions, they'd either like to put them in the chat or put your hand up, then I will. Oh, Mark's got his hand up straight away. Right, we'll start with Mark. Get the show on the road.
Yeah, thanks. I thought so. This might not apply to Essex because obviously I'm kind of coming at it from more of a Hertfordshire perspective because we're going through the same thing with Hertfordshire. But with the local the voluntary sector organisations that have commissioned contracts with whether it's a county council or district council, do you know what happens to those contracts and funding if those legal entities no longer exist?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mark, the simple answer is live and extant contracts gets novated at the time of the move. I mean, obviously, between now and 2028, all manner of contracts will come to a natural end. And in some ways, that's the more complex, because the real world doesn't stop, right? Services don't stop. I might invite Charlotte to say something, maybe not straight away, but take a few questions Charlotte may want to add. So, you know, we are not the first people in the country to do this. Contracts will be novated. Obviously, there is a very drawn out transition period. The upside of that is that when the map is known, the conversations will, when the government's taken its decision, the conversations will obviously deepen, and it will vary, whether from some of our very biggest contracts. So we are due to go out to reprocure our highways, you know, the multi-million pound contract, ECC's facilities management contract over many tens of buildings is due for renewal. And of course, the same will apply at local level, but hence why I emphasize service transition, safe, you know, the words of safe and legal, very prominent in everyone's mind. So simple answer is novation, but obviously not all contracts will run beyond 2028. And you should obviously be talking to your contract manager within a district or within a county function.
Thanks. You're on mute, Tina.
I'm on mute when I was asking her to unmute. Maria, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. That was really interesting. I was drawn by something you said about the voluntary sector delivering 1 billion in value, and I wondered how much that actually costs Essex County Council at the moment. So obviously I know lots of us get funding from outside of Essex County Council, but I can see that the NDC has got 30 million to potentially fund some of us, and that seems like a very small amount of 1 billion. And I just wondered how that would be allocated, and if that's a realistic amount.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of things here, and Charlotte might actually want to jump in on this. The first thing, I think in your question, I mean this sort of respectfully, a couple of things conflated, and that might be because my presentation is not clear, so I'll take the ownership of that. So one is the scale of VCS, or I can't get the acronyms right, but the VCS contribution, which of course is funded by all manner of sources, including obviously contracts that we run where you're the provider or where the districts run. And I think the reason for including that is just to illustrate the importance of, and to demonstrate to you that we understand that, and hence my answer to Mark's question. On the neighbourhood delivery committees, so our proposal is that 28, I appreciate you haven't got the slides to refer back to, but that map, so they're quite big neighbourhoods, but they relate to place identity. The 30 million is simply saying we are planning to put money aside to allow their operation. So it's not the commissioning budgets per se. I mean, it may include some community pots, you know, very small sums of money that in the first instance they would have. But I'd sort of draw that distinction from the commissioning of services, of which colleagues on this call, your organisations, play a part. And then that is sort of seed funding classed as an endowment, so that basically to prevent, as I think is the case in other business cases, you know, we really want localism arrangements. We really want local, but there's no means to pay for them. So I hope that sort of clarifies two separate things. I don't know, Charlotte, do you want to jump in on anything on the overall expenditure in the system? Go on.
Sorry, now I'm on mute, Maria. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, as you know, and we all know on the call, the amount of money that's in the system is a lot more than 30 million. But the 30 million is really, as Tom says, to enable that localism to happen, because asking our voluntary sector to come to the table isn't free. So there needs to be some money in the system that enables that to be, for the voice to really be heard, and not just in an engagement way, but really in a be at the table and influence the way that money is invested locally, so that we can ensure that localism is reflected. As Tom says, the investment that ECC makes and other partners make into organisations such as yourselves is a commissioning budget, which actually sits separate from that. But the value, that 1 billion value that you bring as organisations to the sector, we're doing some work at the moment to sort of like try working with the university, for example, to try and look at social return on investment so that we can start to really demonstrate the value that organisations are giving, because it's not always ticking £5 here and £5 there, is it, as you all know? So we're hoping to do some work there that then we can share across the whole of our sector as a tool that we can really start to demonstrate that power, so that when commissioners are thinking about investing, they can see the social return on investment that they're coming off the back of that, and we've got a shared model around it. So be really keen when we get a little bit further down the road on that, and there is going to be an event in January, date yet to be determined, which is an open invite to the voluntary sector to come and talk about some of that transition stuff and some of the things that we're doing more strategically, like the social return investment, like volunteering, like funding, to come and get some voices at the table that can help shape that work.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte. Rachel Jennings, you want to ask your question?
Thank you, and thank you, Tom, for the presentation. It was really helpful. So I'm here talking from a health perspective, so not voluntary sector myself, but I thought it was really good to hear about the work you've been doing for Essex Community Foundation. I thought it was really impressive, the work that they've done and the reports and the the principles and recommendations they've made. I think for all of us as statutory organisations looking to think about how we do embed that civil society covenant is really important for us when we're all going through those changes. I guess some of the things I was thinking about was that bit about localism, the reduction in the councillors and where so much of our voluntary sector is sort of rooted in their neighbourhood. So there's going to be a lot there, I guess, for our voluntary sector around trust, around trusting, what we're saying, that we are going to follow through on what we do with that. And I guess acknowledging that there's that power imbalance. So even if they see that we aren't quite doing what we said we were, it's not always as easy for them to be able to hold us to account in that way. So again, I think that's how it comes back to that civil society covenant and thinking about how we are living and fulfilling all of those things. But that bit around convening and sort of bringing organisations together, I know we're sort of going slightly off on the devolution side of things, but do you see any have you got thoughts about the future role of the mayor and their ability to convene and bring all of the partners together, one of which obviously would be our voluntary sector? Do you have thoughts on that at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I do. And if you look around the country, I think you're sort of scratching at something which most mayors have done in one form or another. Can I just check you can hear me? Is that all right? My laptop has been playing up. Sometimes the mic doesn't come on. So, Andy Burnham became mayor of Greater Manchester in 2017. The first thing he did was say, I want to solve homelessness. Now he's got no formal responsibility for homelessness in the mayoral powers, but it's just an example of where mayors do become that figure. I mean, obviously it rests a little on who gets elected, what their policies and priorities are. And indeed, the government in the bill in the Commons at the moment is strengthening that convening power of mayors. And I think it's interesting. I mean, again, you only saw it for a few seconds, but the slide starts with economic powers, but goes right down to public health and public service reform, as well as the wider policing powers. You can well imagine a mayor stepping squarely into that space. I guess the downside of a mayoralty on a geography as big as ours is that we're a very big place. So you kind of need other people active in the system. But I think that is, and the ICB colleagues are, I mean, obviously we're moving to a single ICB, very keen to engage on how the emerging combined authority works with the ICB, and colleagues from, well, maybe you're involved in some of those discussions, but from the alliances are starting to contribute. So I think there's a big role. The thing to watch out for, well, the mayor will almost certainly be at the kind of big strategic level in the first instance, and that we don't lose something in the gap in between.
Thank you. Bex, if you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm Bex Corney from Essex Council for Voluntary Youth Service. We've been part of the work with Essex Community Foundation and the other CVSs across Essex. My concern or my question really is around the youth service, because that's who we support, the voluntary youth sector. Essex Youth Service themselves have responsibility for a lot of buildings which the voluntary youth sector are very much reliant on for delivery of the work they're doing. And also the other support that's provided from the other unitary authorities equivalents, as much as each has some one, you know, there's like Essex has got a good youth service. And my question is, where does the youth service sit within this structure, and also what is going to happen with the buildings once there's a split within the different unitary authorities? Who's going to hold responsibility for those?
It's a great question, and it actually shows the value of this sort of dialogue, because inevitably, you can read our business case, there's 250 pages of it, but it doesn't get anywhere near some of the detailed questions which rightly you flag. And it was a bit like the initial foundation round table, as we start to think about transition, calibrating the things that are dominating our minds with what actually has the greatest impact, and where a little bit of certainty can go a very long way. It's really important. So I sort of really value the feedback, and I'm sure Charlotte and other colleagues will note that. I mean, in simple terms, before coming to the specifics, things that are done, so we call, I'll speak in the language of local government, right, but upper tier, so the County Council, Southend and Thurrock. The County Council's upper tier functions, the assumption should be they will be disaggregated, i.e. split up into whatever the number of new councils will be. And that, you know, goes to the very heart of why we actually think 3 is a much safer number than 5 or 4. You can argue that point, but that is our view as Essex County Council. And as I think many of you will know, we have, in Ofsted terms, outstanding children's services, and in CQC terms, we have good adult social care. On the specifics of then things like youth service, and I'm not obviously from that part of the council, so it's really important to talk to colleagues in Helen Lincoln's side of the house in terms of the planning and thinking. We need to almost go line by line through service, which is to identify those things where there may be a very powerful argument for keeping them together at a pan-county arrangement. So I can think of things in my own function. I'm not saying this will or won't happen, but Active Essex operates across the county and Southend and Thurrock. Is there a case for keeping that together rather than disaggregating? But we obviously can't keep lots of things together. The new bodies are sovereign bodies. And then the final bit on buildings is a bit like my answer on contracts. You know, the estate will be distributed on the basis of the footprint, but you're not, I think, really asking a kind of technical who owns the building. It's about the service and the use. And again, as we do the detailed transition, what we'll want to get into is, well, what are the assets? You know, where's the community using? What are the assets? That's not a promise that there will be no change. There is obviously a huge driver, but I think it is a kind of undertaking basically to work openly and to make sure we have the information to take really informed decisions. So I've given you quite a long answer, but it's quite a lot of dimensions to the question. And if you're not talking to youth service colleagues within ECC, then that's the next stage. This is obviously an overview briefing on the business case as a whole.
I think it's massively important, but I think it's also important to be talking to Essex Youth Service themselves, because the delivery that they provide and the support they provide to the voluntary sector is absolutely massive. Whereas Active Essex often, and I'm not saying either of these should be split up or, you know, not form under, provide a lot of funding around sport and activity, but they don't provide youth work in the same sense of that core youth work where and that infrastructure available of actual physical locations for the youth work to take place.
Yeah, no, I mean, don't take anything I've said as a sort of, I'm not, if I'm honest, particularly familiar with the ins and outs of the work.
Tom, it's
So
okay. I know
I'm
this is a broader
giving you
meeting.
general answers. What I am trying to do is recognise absolutely the point. I live in Hackney. I chair a very small charity, not providing vital services, I should say. And I mean, I've been doing it for 5 years before I came to local government. Let me tell you, it's an eye-opener being the other end of the decisions that we take, and how very small decisions for a council are very big decisions for small bodies. So I'm sort of acknowledging the point without leading you one way or other on specifics. I suspect Charlotte might want to come in on this. Her hand was bobbing up and down. You're also on mute if you are talking, Charlotte.
I am talking and I am on mute. Yeah, sorry, Bex. I just wanted to pick up on something that Tom was saying there, just looking at it from a service perspective, because like the youth service, who will be looking at their delivery and thinking about what that looks like under LGR, the subject matter experts that are in the individual services will be part of the design moving forward. So I've already started to do some of that thinking, although informal, because we don't know what it looks like yet. There are some underlining principles, like the underlining principles we've put in for the voluntary and community sector, that each of the services, including Essex Youth Service, I'm sure, as the subject matter experts, knowing their delivery model, will be thinking about what that looks like under local government reorganisation, the way that they invest the money now, and thinking about what their narrative is for what it should look like post LGR, because that sort of level of detail will come a bit more once we know what the makeup looks like, whether we're working 3, 4 or 5. So be rest assured, those individual subject matter experts in the youth service, and like we are in public health, are already starting that thinking, so that we're ready for when that detailed design starts to happen, and we can share our expertise to help inform what the future looks like. So hopefully that sort of like provides a little bit of reassurance of what's happening in the individual services. I just wanted to touch on something you said, Rachel, because that's probably one of my questions as well, about community and the mayoral combined authority, etc. So which is why I think that having the neighbourhood decision committees and having that protected funding to really hopefully make them happen, gives us that infrastructure on which to build something, because we have those local committees with the voluntary and community sector in it, with our parish councils in it, with our councillor representatives in there. So we've got something on which to create and bring the voice of localism up into the combined authority. So I think having that structure in place can be really powerful as a jump off and a starting point for what will happen at the Mayoral Combined Authority. Sorry, Tom, that might not be your thinking moving forward, but it's sort of like what's been in my head as somebody who works in communities as well, that where we can protect something and have something where we have real voice and power for the sector, can really start to embed that as our culture moving forward within Essex.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
Right. It doesn't look like there's just one message in the chat for Tom to say that if you would like to go to one of the Essex VCSE Alliance meetings, Alison Wilson would welcome that, and she can let her know, and she would she can sort that. I don't know. Is there any more questions from anybody? Charlotte?
Yes, sorry, I'm going to take a little bit of an opportunity here, because it is linked to this, and it sort of like would be important for the transition piece. We have a lot of work going on for the Caring Communities Commission at the moment. There's a lot of strategic opportunities in there for the voluntary and community sector, whether it's volunteering, whether it's funding, whether it's civic leadership. So a lot of those sort of like strategic actions that sit within the Commission can help during that transition period. As I said, we are setting up an event in January. So Essex Community Foundation, because they've supported around the principles and things like that, are supporting us around setting that event up. So be really interested in seeing guys on this call represented in that session, so you can really bring your thinking and your voice to some of those challenges, which we might have an opportunity to unpick through LGR. You know, some of the things have always niggled us with the current system. Let's see what we can do during the transition to get us in a good place for LGR moving forward. So just wanted to sort of like open it up, and we will be sending invites out when we get those through you, Rachel, for example, so that you can send it out through your group.
I was just going to say that if you can forward it with our 3 VCFSE alliances assemblies, we can then circulate that out. That will be great. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll get that to you as soon as we've got the invite ready and we've got the date and venue, etc.
And I've seen Tom has replied to Maria's question in the chat about gaps in existing work. So he has replied to that around business as usual continues, including multiple reforms from central government across services. So there is no pause. So that is what Tom has said.
Let me speak to that since there were no other hands. I mean, it's a bit, sorry, Maria, it's a bit cursory to sort of try and answer complex questions. I suppose the message to really emphasize is, like you, we're operating in a changing landscape, whether it's imminent child poverty strategy, whether it's promised send reform, we've got budget next week, etc., 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 and we will continue to do our very best within the constraints we operate to innovate, not allow gaps. So it's not a sort of freezing of BAU until 2028, but obviously in a constructive way you can help ensure if you see a so-called gap growing bigger, being unattended, you should pick up the phone, right? That's the point of this. There is, let's be honest, there is a real risk that a lot of leadership attention and political attention gets focused on structures, and you must identify if you see a concern or a risk, at least that we can then act on it. So sorry, my reply is a bit cursory, but that's what I'm trying to say.
Thanks.
Tina, if there were no other questions, I just wanted to really emphasize the next stage. I mean, obviously I've shared a huge amount of information. Andy is going to put in the chat a link to the hub where all 4 business cases are published. So, we're promoting our business case, but you ought to look at the others. There's a lot of detail and all the technical annexes. I appreciate not everyone will want to get into those. Obviously, we would love it if you would support what we are putting forward. We believe very strongly the arguments, the substance and the merits of everything we're discussing. Equally, we totally respect if you prefer a different model. Some of you work in very particular geographies, I understand that. And the government will be coming out to that consultation, and I think all of you will be on a stakeholder list, but we'll certainly use this to make sure you're made aware of that. And the government asks a series of questions. It's done it in Surrey about all 4 business cases and invites people to feed in. So, there's more information if you want it. We'd love you to support our business case for all the reasons that we've set out. And then there is a formal consultation where you can respond. So I'll leave that there, but thank you for the opportunity to bring this to life a bit.
Before I hand over to Mark to close, just to let you know, I will send out this recording and I'll speak to Vicky and we'll get the slides to share with everybody who could or couldn't attend today, and get them over to everybody. So I will try and get that sorted out. Mark?
Thanks, Tina. And thanks everyone for attending, and thanks, Tom, for that really insightful presentation. So I think we can now bring the meeting to a close.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I was just going to ask you a couple of questions, Tina.
Hang on, before we do that, let me just stop recording.
Yeah, and I will